What's poppin' YouTube? Welcome back. I got a DIY tutorial for you today. I'll let Jackie introduce.
My name's Jackie. I'm the owner of King's Auto. Today we have a 2013 BMW 335 XDrive up on the lift. We're going to do a clutch replacement. We're actually using the 550i clutch because that's the same clutch I was using the IS's, and apparently they hold a lot more power, a lot more bang for your buck. You don't have to go with anything crazy aftermarket performance wise. So let's get started.
Start by removing a bunch of 8 and 10 millimeter bolts to remove all these under trays. Go to this cross brace, it's 6 T50s. And we're going to start loosening up the bolts on the exhaust, or that hold up the exhaust in the back. Brace it with something in the middle. Obviously with a lift you can get a lot of things under there. Keep on removing these panels. I believe these are all 10s. We're going to move on to this bracket that holds on the exhaust up to the transmission. I believe it is an E10 and an E12. Next up, we got the downpipe. So loosen up that bolt on the nut rather, on the V-band. Get another person to help you out. You're going to want someone to hold it in the back, and then start taking off the exhaust from the front end. In this case, we just took off the whole entire exhaust. We did not take it apart piece by piece. Just way easier that way. So next, you're going to start by taking off a bunch of these 10 millimeter fasteners to get the heat shields off. I want to say there's 12 or 14 of them in total. Start a nice little organized pile for all your hardware. You don't want to lose all these things. Also, BMW recommends that you buy new hardware for a lot of these parts, such as the bell housing. We didn't do that in this case, but oh well.
So you're going to want to mark the drive shaft before you take it out and make sure it goes back the same way. Most of the time you're not going to have a problem, but you can clock it differently, and sometimes you'll get like vibrations and like, because it's like worn together a certain way or it's balanced together a certain way at some point. So you just want to make sure it goes back the same way. Like I said, most of the time you're probably not going to have a problem, but you don't want to run into the problem if you're trying to figure it out.
Now get rid of that little middle brace right there. That's 2 half-inch bolts. It's a bushing or bracket center support for the drive shaft. Next, you're going to get 2 18 millimeter wrenches and start loosening up the nuts and bolts that hold the drive shaft over to the transmission, and then brace it with a bungee cord off of the fuel lines there. Next, we move on to the front drive shaft. You do the exact same thing, except this time it's only 4 bolts. Start removing that transmission brackets, 4 13 millimeters. Alright, now start reaching in further and further for all those electrical connections. In this case, Jackie here, I think he has 1 electrical connection done. He's removing the slave cylinder. That was the ground strap right there. And then we can move on to the bell housing bolts. Obviously the ones on the bottom are much easier to get to, but the ones on the top, you're going to require a very long extension mixed in with some universal joints to reach over at the same angle that the transmission goes at, and blindly get to that one E14 and one E12, I believe is what the sizes are on the top 2 bell housing bolts.
Incredibly loud.
Now this is pretty straightforward here. You just have to kind of fish for them with your wrench and your fingers whenever you can reach. The next thing that we kind of got snagged on was the bitch clip. It's a little clip with a dowel in it that holds the shifter in place, snug up against the transmission. The driver's side one came out super easy. The passenger side one held us up for about an hour and a half. We could not get the dowel out of the shifter. Unfortunately, Jackie broke it off of the clip, the retaining clip that it lives on. His dad, fortunately, was able to preserve it. He preserved it by flaring it out by hitting it with a center punch a couple times, and obviously it's aluminum. Flared out nice over that clip and held on. We were able to reuse it.
Right now,
there's that bitch clip
stuck in there, and this clip is rotating independently of this dowel. So it's not even free. The retainer is free.
That thing fucking sucks. See how broken it is?
It's a rod and it's held in by this little thing.
Yep.
This piece came off. I mean, if I get it out, I could weld it back on. Not a big deal. But...
All right, so at this point, all the bell housing bolts, all the electrical connections were disconnected, except for now, to make it easier with the bitch clip, he went inside and removed the shift knob and the boot so we can get more clearance on the transmission. Lastly, I think there was one last electrical connection, actually. It was the gear selector sensor, which essentially just tells you on data logs, for example, which gear you're in. That one was at the very, very top, and it was actually, the retainer for it was a little broken, but it still seems to stay in just fine, and that's how it was when Jackie got to it. So we'll blame the previous owner for that one, but all in all, fortunately, things work just fine, still fine. You know, days after the clutch install, we're good. And then, yeah, go ahead and pry that transmission back. If you're switching to a new flywheel or replacing the flywheel, by all means, pry against it and try to just finagle and wiggle that transmission until it comes loose off the shaft. Once you have it on the transmission jack, make sure you and a partner ratchet strap it down because that thing is pretty heavy and also it's high up. You don't want that thing falling on your feet or in general just onto the cement. You will probably damage something. So once it's ratcheted, move it out the way, and then you can start disassembling the pressure plate, the old clutch, and in this case, we're gonna remove the
this is the bracket I was talking
flywheel.
about. Someone fucking broke. The last sensor I was feeling for, this is fucking broken. I was like feeling around for it forever.
What do you mean broken?
Like the clip, like the detent. I took it out by just pulling on it. But I couldn't get it out because I was feeling around for the longest time for a fucking detent. See, this side, easy. This shit came right in, came right out, and it clips into here. And that's how it locks.
While the motor
Pop it up, slide it out. This thing did not want to fucking do that. Even this is like kind of hard to get in. Oh, especially at this end here. Yeah, it's fucked.
Unless you're down to do that, which I definitely not.
I'm gonna call BMW and see if I get another one today.
All right, so here are the new parts. That's the new Luke dual mass flywheel, direct OE replacement. They're actually also the OE manufacturer for BMW, so fits up just fine. This is actually the clutch from the 550i. Look at that. Look at all that grabbing power. That's the old clutch right there. And old clutch with the old flywheel. My goodness, of course my shit was slipping. So here's Jackie removing the old flywheel, cleaning things up. I didn't fully in-depth film all this, so my apologies, but it's pretty simple. I believe it's 6.6mm Allen bolts to remove the pressure plate, and then I'm not sure exactly what size to remove the flywheel itself. You should be able to figure out if you have a whole E and T torque set. It's not too complicated. That's the new clutch fork pivot pin. So Jackie's just cleaning the stuff up. His dad forgot to lube up and grease up all the moving parts there, so Jackie's just applying some grease. You can see on the clutch fork pivot pin, on the shaft, on the clutch fork, reinstalling everything. And then actually Luke gives you a little thing of black lube, which you'll see he puts on the seal right there. And then boom. So he had already installed the clutch and the clutch plate. That was him removing the centering tool. Obviously you gotta remove that before you reinstall your transmission. The dual mass flywheel, it's a bunch of T60 hexes, and you torque them down to 89 foot-pounds of torque. Now finally you get the transmission back up there, align everything, get some people to help you. Once it's on, you can start putting back all the bell housing bolts on, a bunch of E12s and E14s. Here's a screen grab of the order in which they all go on. There's varying lengths and varying head sizes. Also, side note, make sure you put Loctite on all your clutch and flywheel hardware. That's very important. So here Jackie's reinstalling the transmission bracket. That's 4, I believe, 13mm bolts. Once that's on there, you pretty much, at that point, can just torque everything down and start putting in the drive shaft. That's the centering bracket here, going back in. Like I said before, it's 2 1/2-inch bolts. Make sure it's on there the right way, because initially right there, it was sagging too low. We had to spin it around 180 degrees. The slave cylinder going back in. And then I believe that's the front drive shaft, yep. 4 bolts total. See, you got the blue Loctite on there. I believe it was blue Loctite for the drive shaft and red Loctite for all the clutch, pressure plate, and the flywheel bits. All right, now the heat shields are going back on. So with the last stretch, make sure to tuck those little black carpets underneath the heat shields. That's how it's supposed to sit, I believe. Or maybe it's vice versa. I don't remember, I'm not a mechanic. That's why I hired Jackie to do this. So now we're reinstalling the exhaust here. There's 2 brackets in the back. Make sure to re-plug in your valve. Otherwise, you probably will get a light. Alrighty, and then the V-band is going back on. Again, also with this, make sure that little gasket with the little teeth on it, make sure that's still good to use. If not, buy yourself a new one before you do this job, because you will get an exhaust leak. And then put that bracket back on that holds the exhaust to the transmission, and finally tighten down your V-band. Make sure everything's snug. I believe the last part here is the cross brace, and that was 6 T50s. So wrench that down. Check your clearances. Put the underbody panels back on. Again, that's a bunch of 8 and 10 mils, I believe. And honestly, at this point, you're pretty much at home stretch. Just tighten everything down. Do a little Googling, have water. Make sure you got all the torque specs right on everything before you have to bring it back up on the lift or jack stands and have to redo it all again. Check to make sure all your electrical connections are together. You don't want to get any lights. You don't want any funny business, we'll call it, once the car is back on the wheels. And then make it look pretty again. Put the panels on, drop it down. You should be good to go. Now, initially, Jackie actually got back in the car, reinstalled the shifter, and he could not, at first, put it into gear. Now, one thing to note, it probably has something to do with the hydraulic fluid, the clutch fluid, which obviously comes from the same master cylinder, I think, as the brake fluid in this car. Also, I have an ECS tuning clutch pedal bump stop, so that could have to do with, I don't know, maybe it wasn't getting enough travel to actually be able to activate the new clutch. But here, you look, and within moments, it activates just fine, and I can tell you from driving it, it drives like a dream.
What's wrong? Oh, it's not going in. Oh, okay. Clutch just needed help. I was like, the clutch wheel felt mad weird.
So that's pretty much it. Thanks a lot for watching. For even more detailed instructions on tools you might need, on socket sizes, on torque specs, check out Kern, Kern 417 on YouTube. He's the inspiration I got to do this video on the clutch replacement for the F30 32s and F80s. His is different though because it's a rear wheel. I wanted to show you guys what it's like on an XDrive car. Not too much different, a couple extra parts, but you get the idea. Combine the 2 videos together if you need to, and good luck with your clutch job. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any more questions, leave them down in the comments below. Thank you.
Pretty fun job. We'll definitely do it again. The only real snag that we hit was on the clip that holds in the shifter to the transmission. For some reason it got like seized into its bore, and had to get creative to get it out pretty much. That probably took up like an hour and a half of time, so if that clip came out like it should have, it would have been done a lot faster, honestly. But very straightforward job, you know, very standard. Nothing was very hard to get to. top two bolts were a little tricky to figure out at first, but once you get it down, it literally is a matter of like 10 seconds to get the socket on there and find it. There's two different sizes, that's why. One was like an E12, and you would assume that both up top would be the same bolt, but one was an E12 and the other was an E14, which made no sense, but that's how it was. So aside from that, it's pretty straightforward. Good job, you know, not hard. Definitely helps with the lift. And aside from that, it's pretty much it. Clutch feels good, grabs really low. We'll break it in and see how much power it holds. Aside from that, you know, just a 335i clutch.